Welcome one and all to another TMG interview. My name is Paul Preston, here with my brother in print from themovieguys.net, Ray Schillaci, and he has tipped me off as to who we're talking to today. He said she'd be a great guest of the interview, and based on my research, he's right. She's been involved in animation, visual effects, indie film, Marvel, Technicolor, and she runs her own production company, Hardy Howell. Let's hear all about that juggling act that is the career of Katie Hooten.
Yay! Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. And, you know, I want to talk about Marvel. Honestly, what is it, noon on Friday? I'd be doing that now anyway. Noon most days, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. But when a filmmaker comes on here, we usually talk about what's new. And a lot of times people are plugging something that's new. So correct me if I've missed a few of the new things you're up to, but something that's pretty fresh. Last year, you were appointed head of studio at Technicolor's pre-production studio. So tell us what that job entails.
Well, I'm here in Culver City, California, and we are a kind of a funky little studio for this company. We are a pre-production service studio tacked on the front of a huge visual effects machine, which is Technicolor. So we have many brands under one umbrella. We have MPC, which is known for huge films like Lion King and Jungle Book, and we have a brand called Mr. X. They're doing a ton of episodic work as well as film. And then we have an animation team called Mikros. And the pre-production side services art and visualization needs, sometimes for those brands, sometimes for other random projects that come our way. So we like to get in with the filmmakers really early. Sometimes there's not even a script. Sometimes the visual work that we do in advance informs the script writing. And we jump in before green light sometimes, just to help build out the world, build out some very early ideas, maybe play with some action items, action ideas to get things going. And then many times service a green light, or beyond that, start very early so that they can do a more accurate bidding process for the visual effects that comes later.
Okay, so that brings tons of questions. First of all, I'll say the departments that report to you, which is always exciting to hear about how important you are. The art department, visualization and real-time production, VFX supervisors, and business development. So a lot of people are throughout the day are going, damn it, get Katie, right? So, and then things are getting solved.
Yeah, some of those people were more like roommates, and they function on their own. Business development that I work with here, they have an enormous job of bringing in work for our entire global company. And so it's more like, hey, are you guys good over there? But they definitely have their own machine going. And then the VFX supervisors also report to an executive producer that's separate from me.
Is that at Technicolor or
at
per
Technicolor?
Project? Okay.
Yeah, at Technicolor. But they serve as a resource to us as we jump in. It's always to our advantage to have as much information up front as possible. And so a lot of times the VFX supervisors will be the key mouthpiece for that. Sometimes we're not talking with the director right away, and we'll have the VFX soup who has been in some key creative kickoffs, and they can say to us, look, we want to supply some early looks, some early visualization, to show the client or the potential client that we really understand what they're trying to do with this film, or we understand that there's a new technical tool they want to try. We want to test it out in advance. And so we'll go down that road with them. And a lot of the technology, Ray and I were talking about this the other day, it's so new that I think I used to have a lot of nerves about what we're pitching, and that I personally couldn't sit down and click the keys and make it happen. But it's the understanding in my role, I consider myself as someone that removes barriers for people. And so I don't necessarily have to understand the highly skilled technical tools that they are operating or that they're developing, but I can learn the dependencies to find out what happens before what's getting in the way of what conversations should happen as early as possible, what ones are okay to leave down the road we don't know yet, and sort of start to categorize and support the process, and on a daily basis see like what's getting in the way of us moving forward with this conversation, the creative mix of how we're putting the team together or how we're envisioning this movie to roll out.
you were talking about the trouble, or I don't know if it would be called trouble, but what you went through with Infinity War and then Endgame at the same time.
Yeah, that was just such a massive production because it was multi-year and multi-movie, a lot of secrecy. And so they were shooting both films at the same time, doing a lot of the shooting in Atlanta. I had deployed teams there, and we also had a large team in LA. And sometimes there are limited script pages that only certain people on the crew are able to receive because it is so secretive. And then of course there are reshoots and reworks of, third act of any film is always the one up for discussion. Is it really taking you to the destination that the first two acts have set up? And is it going to be gratifying enough? And so there was a lot of third act work done on both films. And then you run into A-list actors and their availability, and leaning into VFX to be able to fill the gap sometimes for availability, to have all those actors together in this massive fight at the end,
Paul, and I had mentioned to Katie, it was so interesting because she said A-list actors, and before Marvel, none of those people were A-list actors. That's really remarkable.
Yeah, or it might have had a...
Do you want to get me started on Marvel? Because I got some other Technicolor questions. I mean, I love Marvel. But going back to Technicolor for a second, because there's so many things you said. Process is the thing that just I'm fascinated by, because everyone kind of knows the process of an actor, a director. I mean, maybe they do, but still there's fascinating things to learn about. But it's all the other people that a lot of times, I'd like to, if you listen to a show like this, hopefully you'll learn something about that process. So you talk about helping and breaking down barriers, which is a great way to phrase that for a filmmaker in terms of, I want to achieve this. You jump in and lift any kind of barrier they have that's in their way of making it happen. So how does that happen? Does the studio get a production and then come to Technicolor? Do you just have your fingers in a million relationships in the industry now? So where it's like, you just know that you're the place to go? Or does someone who's like, I got some money and I don't know, you guys? I mean, how does it work like that?
It depends on, there are different goals, I think, to start. Relationships are pretty key. We hope we have repeat clients that have worked with us in the past and want to come back and work with us again. But yeah, always having to grow it. It's a really competitive business. And this time in particular is very competitive in terms of luring clients who may have had a great experience with us, but it always comes back to like price point and what they'd like to do for the resources that they have. But in terms of getting started creatively, like I said earlier, we don't always know what they have to start with. And sometimes the timeline's so crunched that they need to get started before there's a finished script. So our team might get a draft, but with cautions and with sort of earmarked for changes that are coming. Sometimes we can help with that. For example, Ant-Man and the Wasp, for anyone who hasn't seen it, little spoil, but it plays with scale a lot, right? It plays with things that are growing and shrinking. So like there's a whole car chase there that's really fun, but that car chase started with our team where they said, we're not really sure how it's going to play out, but we do know we're going to play with scale in a car chase to show us some stuff, show us some gags. And then those things were able to grow into a really fun, fast sequence in San Francisco. So that's an example where there's an idea and filmmakers might know where something's going, but they don't really know exactly how it's going to button up in the end. And visualization really helps with that, because sometimes you don't know until you can see it. Sometimes, as screenwriters as well, that Ray, especially you were saying, sometimes you don't know who the person is on the other end of the script that's reading it, and you don't really know if they're going to be seeing what you're saying. Sometimes the exposition for the action sequences we'll see will be like, they fight. It's like, what does that mean? Then what happens?
Jackie Chan did that. Like it would be dialogue, action, then just a page just said Jackie Chan fight sequence. And you knew he and his guys were going to come in to take care of it. And then back to dialogue, action.
Yeah, so there are some super fun things that happen if you do end up with that page that says like they fight or whatever it is. I've had a chance to work a lot with Stunt Viz, which is really interesting. And it's usually a team of people who are former gymnasts or wrestlers or whatever they might be, parkour experts. And they'll work out some moves in a sequence. And sometimes we can intercut that with some low poly CG moves that will intercut with fights that they see. They can show that to the director, and the director can give comment on, well, I was seeing a camera move here, or I'd like to see it from this angle, or more of this, less of that. If it's a character that has appendages that will have to be added later, you know, as in CG, then you have to make room for that and figure out how do you show that? How do you plan for that? And then we try to keep in mind, everyone needs to be very cognizant that eventually you have to actually shoot it. And so how do we make it achievable? And that leads more into Tech Viz, where you're talking about lenses that you want to use exact dolly track length and the space you have to work with. For example, in game, there is a sort of somber scene that follows. I'm going to just go with, in case someone hasn't seen it yet. So there's one person in the world who hasn't seen it yet. Sort of a somber scene where basically the entire cast is saying goodbye to a character, and we had to provide Tech Viz in many different ways for that situation because it happens on the edge of a lake. There are existing trees. They knew they wanted to shoot it very thoughtfully on a crane, and we did an entire setup where every character was accounted for, and we were able to place them, you know, each person here and there very carefully to run that sort of crane shot through the crowd in a number of ways to avoid natural things that were existing there by the lake, as well as what might be needed to slot in CG later. So there's so many different reasons for visualizing something in advance before you get there with a bunch of equipment and people and try to figure it out from there, you know.
You
and
were
then
talking.
You have Alan Silvestri scoring the hell out of that moment. I mean, if you haven't seen Endgame by now, I know. If you haven't seen Endgame by now, I can't help you. But I mean, or maybe I don't want to know you.
Katie was also talking about actors, you know, having to play to tennis balls and such.
Yeah. And that's something that I find completely fascinating as somebody that started long ago with an acting background, being a theater major in college and doing some limited acting in LA early on, to get the raw plates back from a major film that no one's seen yet. And of course, it's always shrouded in secrecy and NDAs and all of that. And to see it basically looks like community theater. It's like heavy green and blue screen, a couple of actors, someone in a weird mocap suit. If they're playing a very tall, very large character, they might have like a stick up their back with a face up here of their character so that there's an eye line for the actors to react to. And to my amazement, I mean, it looks so low budget and so janky. And then you've got actors playing to nothing. They're crying, they're spitting blood, they're you know, doing an amazing job of keeping focused in the moment. And that's when I feel like I would strongly argue to anyone that says like, people who are in superhero movies, like, lame, it's not real acting. And it's like, oh man, if you see these raw plates and you see that they have nothing, no stimulus on the other side, you know, and they are selling the moment, it's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, tell that to Martin Scorsese.
Right. I'm not going to tell anything to Martin Scorsese.
Katie Hooten said, Marty, that no. No, there's I totally, you know, I'm behind that 100%. I mean, Neil Sethi, I think his name was, who played Mowgli in the Favreau redo of the Jungle Book. He had nothing there. I mean, now to be fair, Alan Troutman is an actor who was on set with him. We interviewed him here for the Movie Guys a while back, and he had like Bagheera's head, and he'd bounce around, and he'd, you know, give the kids something to look at, and he'd like say the lines. So he was technically acting, but I mean, there's no trees, there's nothing that real there. That was what eventually was in the film. So I'm always a fan of support that, award that, give something.
Yeah.
to where you recognize how hard that is.
I think there's puppets and things that are used in that moment. One of my favorite movie stories early on for watching a child actor have a very real visceral response was from Close Encounters. And you may have heard this, but there's a moment where the little boy comes into the kitchen and you don't see what happens. You just see on his face what's happening. And then you see all the cupboards are open. Do you remember that moment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the movie?
Yeah.
And he was told, I think Spielberg told him, I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen, but something weird is going to happen. And I just want you to react to it. And from what I have read and heard, someone was in like a gorilla costume, like a pink gorilla costume or something, just sort of like spinning around. And you can just see this weird reaction on the actor's face. He's so little, but he's doing all the things you want him to do, where he's like, not sure if it's funny or is it scary or unexpected, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you ever watch Henry Thomas's audition tape for E.T., it's on YouTube.
Oh,
And Spielberg's just basically acting with him. And that, I mean, he tells him on camera, you got it. Like,
yeah.
you don't hear that a lot, but there's no doubt he has it too. I mean, sometimes you get the kid actor just hits a home run, you know?
Yeah.
Well, the last thing about Technicolor, now this is the company that started like film processes back in the early 1900s. So they've just thankfully had this forward vision to roll with the times and have become a major effects house as well. I think that's pretty, I mean, moving out of the color for film space, clearly that's moved on. So
Yeah.
good for them. And the pre-production studio is pretty new, right?
It is fairly new. The last several years, I mean, it grew out of MPC, which was the larger visual effects company that operates out of London. But now we have sites kind of all over the world, in Berlin and in Paris, and there's a substantial site in Bangalore and in Mumbai. So we've got several locations. But the thing that I think is fantastic about Technicolor, and you hit it, is like it is an over 100-year-old company and has always been a pioneer in filmmaking. And we are trying to use that to our advantage here, because I think on one hand, the trap is to be too corporate and to be slow and to be too big. But I think we're trying to use every advantage where there is resource to try things and to grow, to invest in technology, to invest in talent, and then to not forget that we are a global operation. So ours is hunkered down here in LA, and we try to have a very local boutique style presence where, I hope people would call me and just know me on a first name basis, and it's not some big company they're calling. It's like, it's me and it's my people, and there's just a group of us here, and you can stop by or you can call us anytime. But at the same time, we have to operate behind the scenes with every resource we have, because it's very competitive. And so we are constantly trying to envision how we can work better as a global company, which means using more of the day, pricing competitively. I mean, all of that stuff is a little bit of a bore, but it does have impact overall when you're talking about, like, a lot of my heart is with independent filmmaking and with storytellers that want to be able to have the resource to tell the stories they want to tell. And so it has to be affordable if you're going to bring in fresh voices, new perspective. It can't just be for a huge tentpole every now and then. We really want to be able to give resource to new filmmakers as well.
It's a big released film that you don't have any NDA on or anything that you guys worked on. Like, what's what recent effects?
Oh, I'm super proud of Cruella that's out.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if anybody has, if you've had a chance to catch it. It's been out for a few weeks.
So that's just to give you a timeline of Technicolor. They boasted that Wizard of Oz was in Technicolor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Effects you see in Cruella, same people.
Yeah.
Same house, same label, brand,
Yeah,
correct?
the same brand. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Not
for
the same
us-
people as that 100-year-old guy working on Cruella.
He really
Yeah.
needs to retire. No, it's the same company. It's very exciting. And we have a really great relationship with Disney. We do a lot of work with Disney. And what I love about Cruella is we started with art, with the art department with that, gosh, it may have been like a year and a half or maybe 2 years ago. And we were doing work on that film up to just a few months ago in the art department as well. And so there's different times when we jump in to help with something. We did a lot of post-viz for the movie because there's a lot of puppy work that is leaning on CG puppies. And so that's really fun too. Just to see sort of the planning that we were able to be involved in. It's such a stylish film, such a strong point of view. So we're really proud of the work we did on that one.
I didn't think the dogs were especially impressive. Sometimes, the rubbery movement and everything, you can kind of, and the sort of flat fur, you can tell right away that a dog isn't real. But there were some real convincing, took me a while to go, oh, hang on a second. That move might have been just a little sort of human, reflective of the cartoon or the animated film that the whole genre came from. But they've certainly advanced from many moons ago, which is great. Yeah, good job on all that. And the flaming dress was cool. I don't know who did that, but,
super cool.
Yeah. And then one quick mention of other thing than Marvel, because I want to shout out to Love, Death, and Robots. Although I don't know if you're involved in season 2, but season 2 just came out. But so if you go there to watch that and you dip into season 1, because it's easy to do because these are shorts, animated shorts. And I love the fact that, I could go on about my problems I have with Netflix and YouTube and places like that, but you can't fit shorts a lot of times into network programming, your half hour or 1 hour schedule. So I'm glad that they find a home in these streaming platforms. And Love, Death, and Robots is just that. Tim Miller, David Fincher, and other producers creating a short series that supposedly came out of their want to do a remake of Heavy Metal, the classic movie. And so Ray, you'll want to see these if you haven't. And
I have.
You have?
I have seen.
Oh, you have? Okay, good. So tell me about getting involved with that. I think you did effects with Tim Miller on Terminator Dark Fate. Is that what brought you over to Love, Death, and Robots?
Actually, I came over specifically for Love, Death, and Robots. There was just one particular episode that had live action involved. All the other ones were completely animated. And so that one I was brought on as producer. It was the one that that Tim was directing. And so he was directing simultaneously while he was gearing up for Terminator. So we did a lot of remote work, and it was my first experience working heavily with live action plates and CG on top of that. So I had a bit of a learning curve, but it was a great experience. I loved being able to work with him on it. I think he's like a fantastic visionary, and it was awesome. And then so while I was there at Blur Studios, which is Tim's studio, I was able to help with a few extra things.
Sorry, I was taking it back. Tim Miller owns Blur?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and that's right down the road from where I am right now, from Technicolor. We're neighbors. I just try to work in my neighborhood, basically. I ride my bike to work. I'm too lazy to get in the car.
You've got a $5 million job. You'll make $5 million. You have to come to Santa Clarita.
Thanks. That's where I live.
Yeah, sorry.
Anyway, no. So that's his studio with his wife Jen Miller, and they're doing some super creative stuff there. I'm a big fan of what they do, and so it was an honor to be able to work with them. And he was on the other side of the world, prepping and then shooting Terminator. But anyway, I think it's great that there's a space for an anthology like that to exist, and I really look forward to checking out season 2. I haven't done it yet. And
it won an Emmy. Was your name on that?
No.
Okay. So
just a cog in a wheel.
Next time.
I was going to say, Katie's got all this experience with tremendous experience with animation. I mean, you were the post-production coordinator for high-profile films like Spirited Away and Lilo and Stitch. And you were also heavily involved with a big hit, Hoodwinked, you and your husband and your brother.
Yeah, Hoodwinked was really a family affair. My two brothers were the creators of that. We had a really small team. I had been doing a few years at Disney and was able to pop over my brothers and I grew up making films as kids, like 8mm films, running around the neighborhood, and it's very Spielbergian with our projects and big ambitions. And we had a friend who was our pyro expert, who was like a 5th grader who lit our card table on fire. And you know, we had my mom put on the cap and the trench coat to be the villain for the driving scenes, because everyone who was doing the movie was like 12. So we did a lot of that growing up. And so it's been really cool to work together with better stuff and more experience as we've gotten older. So Hoodwinked was, it was the first independently funded, widely released animation film of its kind. And
Well, I'll give numbers for the listener on that. $110 million worldwide on a $30 million budget, which you don't get from anime. I still don't understand why animation is so expensive. We don't have sets and costumes and actors, but I get it. There's a huge team and lots of expensive software, I guess. But
Hoodwink
and time.
was actually made for, Hoodwink was made for under 9 million.
What?
So,
Wikipedia. How dare you? Box Office Mojo, I think it was. They misrepresent you there.
Yeah, no, it was a bit of a like bubblegum and popsicle sticks kind of production. We had animators primarily in the Philippines that were using off-the-shelf software, and a lot of them were student animators. So it was very labor intensive in terms of there was a lot of learning on the job that was happening with that. And like to this day, yes, the animation is really rough. But what has stood the test of time has been the story that endures and the humor. And that's really what we're most proud of, is the creative idea and the implementation of that idea. And it was interesting because at the time when we had finished that film, there were only 9 of us in the United States that were doing that film, and like half of them were my immediate family. And then the rest of the team was in the Philippines, and we finished a little bit in India. And we went to an animation panel that was being hosted at DreamWorks at the time. And someone asked the last question of the night to the panel. And it was like, you know, directors of all their features. And it was in their fancy screening room. And we had just driven from our little crappy production room in Burbank to go to this panel. And someone asked, what is the future of animation? And this would have been like maybe 2004 or something. And someone on the panel said, I think there's going to be an independent group or groups that come and they're going to kick our butts. They're going to shock us that they can do this without the overhead, and they can do it without a heavily moneyed machine. And that's going to change everything. And we sort of felt this like, whoo, electricity in our aisle, because we felt like, that's us. We're doing it. And so it sort of, I think, it upset the whole structure of how animation was done, because now a lot of companies are doing it independently, and I think very well, a lot of them very well. But at the time, no one had really done a full feature in that way, outside of maybe VeggieTales, which wasn't completely independent at the time. So anyway, it was a proud moment, and that's been sort of our biggest foot in the door as a company. My husband and my brother and myself continuing to develop and pitch original content. And Tim and Todd, my partners, they are writer-directors together. And so a lot of our opportunities in animation. And so we spend quite a bit of time developing and pitching animation for that reason.
And that's Hardy Howe Films, right?
That's Hardy Howe. Yeah, you can check them out.
I knew of Hoodwinked. I know of Hoodwinked. I never knew of its impact until I started doing a little research on you for this. I mean, every research area I found on the web was talking about it, made Hoodwinked, which, by the way, was one of the most impactful movies of animation movies in the last 30 years or whatever, because of that animation movement it sparked in indie animation. And I wish other genres, other studios, other companies would get that idea. My friend Mike J. Nichols, who's an editor and a friend who comes on this podcast a lot, said that the $30 million Star Wars movie will easily be the best one. If they just knock that down to 30 million and really focus on everything else, we'll have a fantastic Star Wars movie again, like the first three were. And I like the 2016 Ghostbusters movie with Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy. It's a very funny movie. You watch it again, especially enjoy all the jokes in it. You get past the fact of all the markers it has to hit with getting the fourth member, getting the headquarters, getting the car, getting their first thing. You know, you kind of, that's so familiar, you lose track of the fact that there's a bunch of great jokes in there. But the biggest problem the movie had was its cost. If they made that for 30 million and it made 150, everyone would be screaming for a sequel. Instead, it makes 150, but it costs 130. And I just wish like all the other genres would learn from that type of model that you set forward in animation. Trim it down, be brilliant anyway, and have the people, because the story's so fascinating, crying for more, and have the studios dying to back you because you're a win for them.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's no question there. I'm ranting.
Just a statement. I'll just agree with you.
Did you get into your appointment at Technicolor and then COVID?
Yeah.
Like, congratulations. How does that immediately affect your work? But it seems like you've come out the other side of it with a job. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, that I know of. They just can't find me. I keep moving rooms in the building so that I keep my job. Yeah,
we're gonna fire her tomorrow, I guess.
We can't find her.
Try and find her in the AM.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what a wild experience for everyone. But what I think the great takeaway is there are things that were just a straight no before COVID. Like, can we have a team working from home? No, absolutely not. It's a complete security issue. We're a content secure company. That would be impossible. No one would agree to it. But then all of a sudden it's like, well, if we're doing the work, everyone needs to agree to certain security protocols, and we can audit that. And just like that, we have to set everybody up from home. And we thought like, oh, gee, this is going to be the weirdest month ever. And then it turns out to be like 14, 15 months. So for me, the key opportunity in that moment was communication. And I think that is across any industry, but especially for what we did at our studio, making sure that we have kind of redundancies in communication. Don't just tell somebody, but reach out to them repeatedly. Not just about the content, not just about the work, but making sure like emotionally are people doing okay? Because I think we all sort of had a surprise assessment about how energizing it can be just to even pass someone in the hallway or have that little bit of water cooler conversation in the kitchen when you're getting your coffee. And it just sort of invigorates when you get back to your desk and you're working on your scene or your own assignments. And not having that, we had to find other ways to just connect about random stuff, connect about personal stuff. And that's been a really important part of our studio engagement, is to try to figure out how do we keep the humanity in our work, where people can go in a silo and do their shots, and they can get remote feedback from their supervisor, but we want to make sure they're also being touched in a human way to feel like they're part of a team, because that's part of the fun of building something together. I think filmmaking is a massive teamwork operation,
Is Technicolor one of those Pixar type campuses? You guys have like a jungle gym and a basketball court, coloring books, a VR thing just in the lobby?
We do not. And I desperately want some of that. No, we do have a ping pong table.
There you
We have
go.
some good snacks. Big on the snacks.
Oh, you got the cereal wall with the different tubes of cereal you kind of load into the bowl.
Oh man, you have so many good ideas.
Been to these places.
Bring
Been to
some of those
DreamWorks.
ideas.
Been to the Disney lot and all that.
Yeah, we're a smaller studio. We have about 80 that operate, and we grow and shrink depending on the kind of work that we have coming in. Yeah, so some of the locations are larger than others. Our main hub being in London, that's sort of like a bigger situation. But here, we have some small things.
I'm curious, what's the difference between Technicolor that was right next to Universal and then it had moved? I mean, is it a bigger facility or is it a smaller facility?
That's just a different arm of the business. So Technicolor had like a post-production arm of their business, and then the color side of the business, the film production, all of that. And so we are just like a different offshoot.
Okay.
It's film and episodic. There's also like a massive advertising wing of the business and animation production. So it's pretty sprawling.
And I think, Paul, what you mentioned, when you talked about what Mojo had said, something about $30 million, a lot of times they include the advertising.
That
And
could be true.
Yeah, and that's outrageous.
I was going to, circling back on that, you're absolutely right. Hoodwink, that is what I think surprises a lot of people. And it's why a film needs to be a certain budget level to justify the spend for all other areas that sort of orbit the film budget. So Hoodwink was made for just under 9, but our P&A budget, like the marketing budget for it, was 40 million. And so that's why they put it out on over 3,000 screens on the first 2 opening weekends. And so I think that's what is so it's just nonsense sometimes. I mean, we've been to pitch animated features. We pitched at a studio one time and they said, "What's your budget?" And we said, "We think we can make this for 15 million." And they said, "Don't ever say that again. Don't say it here. You will never make this movie. It needs to be 60, and that's considered low budget." And that's for animation. So it's because it has to be a film that justifies the overhead of the machine of the studio. So
yeah, and if I remember correctly, Fox and Ridley Scott had a real issue because Fox had said Alien never made the money back because the amount of publicity they had put out for Alien. And I believe Ridley Scott went off and had them audited to find out if this was true.
Yeah, so it's not uncommon for films to report that there's no profit that was made, and it has to be challenged in order to be proven otherwise, because they can put a lot on a budget, a lot of extra on that budget.
Ray, your questions have kept me from Marvel long enough. All right, here we go.
Sorry about that.
No, I mean, I could go. Actually, quick Disney question, because I produced the D23 Inside Disney podcast for Disney, co-produce it. Awesome. And you've obviously worked with Marvel. Ray, do you got a tie-in with Disney? Everybody moves through the mouse house at some point in their career. Ray, I'm sure you have.
God. You're talking about that I had it. I mean, I worked at Disney for a little bit.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it was a very short time. I mean, my time was mostly with Universal, almost 20 years. But I had, a little bit at MGM, a little bit at Culver Studios, and what else? And a little bit at Fox, which I had some very interesting.
Which is now Disney. So there you go. See?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't get away from them.
You can't get away.
All I'm saying is check your mortgage. I'm sure their name is on it. And I would love to talk about working on Destino. And if you haven't seen it, go to the Disney Plus, where you can stream that amazing short where Disney and Salvador Dali worked together in sort of in a past way and then into the present.
You really have done your research. That's great. I love Destino. And Disney feature animation was my first studio gig. So I spent just short of 3 years there doing various work in the post-production department and then in the development department. And Destino was amazing because we got to work with the French studio with basically these old ideas and these old cells that they wanted to finish, which was like a Walt Disney dream at one time, and we were able to finish with them. So it's very trippy, and it won't take too much time if you check it out.
Yeah, it's the closest thing to Fantasia that has been churned out by the studio since that. It's really cool. All right, here's another quick rant. Kevin Feige should have an Oscar, because I don't know how you create this 23 film masterpiece that's never been done before. It's a behemoth, incredible thing. And again, to your point about, hey, it's a cartoon movie, you are not paying attention, because not only are the actors doing things like you said that are asked of them that are what would be asked in any drama, but the plots and stories have the most adult themes of loss and trauma and action and excitement and thrills and adventure. It has everything. And if they gave one to John Lasseter for creating new territory with Pixar, and if they gave one to Peter Jackson for creating 3 movies,
Yes.
this dude has made, like I said, I think it's 23. I'm going to be called out for my numbers maybe, but so I think he should have an Oscar. So here's
And
what
then,
we'll work.
and I have to say, and then these episodic runs that are happening right now on Disney Plus, where it's like amazing stories that are dropping right in seamlessly into timelines that you thought were only meant for the features. And then you realize there's extra information that the episodic stories are telling with WandaVision, or I can't wait for Loki coming up, and definitely like Gobbled Up Winter Soldier that just came out. So I'm a fan too.
Those episodics, when I'm watching Winter Soldier, I felt like I was watching a feature.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Blown away. And I feel that way a lot of times with Netflix too, with Mindhunter and some of these other things that are on Hulu or whatever. You look at these and you go, I feel like this would be in the theater.
Yeah.
It's amazing. The production values and everything.
Well, it's something like I always throw DC under the bus when I start talking about Marvel. But if you look at like Arrow and Flash, and those are TV shows. Marvel, the MCU movies specifically, not all of Marvel, but the MCU look like movies on TV. Yes. So that's the difference. And you, Katie, worked on Spider-Man Homecoming, Thor Ragnarok, Avengers Infinity War, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Captain Marvel, Avengers Endgame, in mostly visual effects and previs. What's it like to get that call? Because you know the thing's a behemoth already by Spider-Man Homecoming. They've got 10 years of movies under their belt and are killing it. So how does that call come your way? And were you a Marvel fan at the time?
Yeah, of course. And I'm a movie fan. I mean, that's why I tell people, like, I'm a movie nerd, like, first and foremost. So I know I have to put on a business hat and definitely don't want to act like a total weirdo in meetings and stuff. But it's not lost on me that these are just really cool films that I would stand in line for a ticket any day. I was really lucky to be working for a company at the time that was contracted to do this work. And I remember one of my friends was about to go work on Ant-Man and the Wasp at the time, and he was going with the whole production team to Atlanta. And he said, do you think we'll get to work on this film together? And I was like, oh, no, Marvel special. They only, the company I was working for, they only put certain people on Marvel. It's very secretive, and I don't think I'll be seeing you there. And then like 2 weeks later, I got this opportunity where the company actually gave me all of the Marvel films they had at the time to be their internal producer on at the company. And so I was able to go to set, and I was able to send teams all over the world to work on these really special films.
Nice. I was going to ask if you went to set. That's cool as hell.
Yeah, very cool. And I had to like not have too much caffeine before and just be like, whatever, it's a movie, okay.
Chris Paul Rudd, Chris Evans,
yeah.
Big thing.
But inside, just like, I can't take any pictures. I can't tell anyone I've been here. Can't tell anyone anything I've seen. But
so about that, on the Disney podcast, we interviewed Anthony Mackie when Falcon and Winter Soldier was coming out, and talked about the secrets he had to keep. And I wasn't aware that he kept the finale. He said the hardest one is the finale of Infinity War, and it had to keep it for 2 years. I didn't know they got that far ahead. Where was it for you in terms of did you have to keep a secret that long before?
I did not read any scripts, and many times our team was only given select.
Even on set, you're seeing stuff, and you got it for
right.
Year and a half. Or
I'd say definitely like a year and a half. But for some of that stuff, what's crazy is we were doing previous work for the films that they were shooting together. And so because I didn't have a sense of orientation to the story, I wasn't really sure. Like, I knew everything basically was a spoiler, but I didn't know which movie it was for. So when I went to see like Infinity Wars, I I didn't see some things that I was waiting for. And then I was like, oh, that's not in this one. That's in the next one.
Yeah.
And then the next one that I basically only worked on major spoilers, and that was it. Those were the only things I had really worked on before I went to another job. So I was, it was like just not being able to tell anybody anything. Sometimes I would say to my kids at home, I'd be like, I saw something super cool today. You will never know what it is. Just know I saw cool things.
But still with emotion, because I would still probably have to be like, how was the work today? I saw cool things. I enjoyed them. It was fun.
Yes.
Like repressing everything for fear of going, hulking out,
Yeah, totally.
So thousands of people working. You watch the end credits, thousands of names are going by. How does that all get organized? Because clearly there's not just one team doing the visual effects. There's multiple. So is it one, like a visual effect? There's going to be a visual effects coordinator, or are there multiple? And who gets assigned what? And how do you know what's coming your way? And how does that all? Because in the end, there it is on the screen. How does it all get organized? I guess.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, and that's a great question. I love those behind the questions. That's always where my brain goes, is like, how do you do this? There's so many pieces, there's so many vendors that work on these movies because they're massive, and the timeline would not allow one company to bear the burden of the entire process. And so like for some of these movies, there's over 20 vendors that are working on certain things, when possible sharing assets, so that there's consistency throughout, and wanting to make sure the finish looks the same all the way through the movie. I mean, if you slow-mo through some of these things, some shots are better than others, and they spend the time on the things that are going to be most impactful. But in terms of the organization, it means that there's a super phenomenal VFX producer with the studio that has a good team around them. Marvel has a tendency to hire female VFX producers pretty heavily, and has like some real badass ladies over there that I've loved working with.
And some badass directors as of late too.
Yeah, absolutely. And are very organized and really keep the trains running on time. And it's just a lot. So it's a massive delegation work, but I think Marvel's done so well because they have a very trusted team that's sort of grown, homegrown from the inside, and then delegates to, trusted team that's done a lot of impressive work over the years. So for my part in being amongst a piece of the machine that's, working on the vendor side, it's just a matter of good communication, hitting your deliveries, making sure that we understand the notes completely so that we don't botch the intention of the moment, and we're giving options. I mean, it's all about like providing more than enough options when possible so that fast decisions can be made to move forward.
And again, all thousands of those people kept quiet. I didn't know about Fat Thor till I sat down in that chair and watched him on screen. I went, how did I not know? And blended Banner Hulk, like insane. Like, I can't believe that. Kudos to everybody for their fine work and for shutting up.
Yeah, I think it's just beloved. And I think those crews are made up of film fans, just like you, just like me. And so there's respect for what they do, and they can't wait when they finish to work on the next one because they're fans.
So it sounds like Marvel took a huge step forward in hiring women, as you said.
I don't know if it's like taking a step forward. I think from its inception, they've had really strong female leadership, and it's awesome. It's been a great experience when I've had.
Well, I was saying compared to the other studio.
Oh yeah. Perhaps I've met a lot of amazing women in the visual effects industry. Usually, though, on the producing side, it's a little bit more difficult to see those opportunities happening on the creative side with VFX supervisors. I think that's a much more difficult place to break into, but on the producing side, I have seen it quite a bit.
And you guys always get the time you want, because the thing about the Marvel movies is the remarkable consistency and quality. There's no like there's no forgotten movie. There's no Phantom Menace. There's no Cars 2. Like everything is just hitting, like they even go back and double down on Thor: The Dark World and The Incredible Hulk by bringing in William Hurt from The Incredible Hulk into more movies, and they go back in time to Thor: The Dark World and make it even more important, even though people might say it was not one of the best. They start their MCU not with Iron Man and Captain America, but with Wanda, Vision, and the Falcon and the Winter. So like their secondary characters get bumped up to high status. So again, what was I talking about? Oh, they always so they always double down and throw the highest quality into everything, and they turn out. I mean, we're going to get 4 Marvel movies in the next year, which is incredible. But they're not. None of them are going to look like, oh, this is the one we didn't have enough time to work on. But you never felt rushed. They find some kind of schedule. Did you find that was the case? You never felt rushed?
Yeah, I think one thing that a lot of big successful franchises do well is they're not afraid to highlight what's not working, even if it feels a little close, a little squeaking close to delivery. And that's something that I think you mentioned Kevin Feige, and I think that comes from his leadership. If something's not working, like he can fix it and he can call it out, and even if the time frame is tight. And that is the challenge in the visual effects business and in the teams that we're in. They may be still trying out some looks for things or trying out a tweak on something when it feels pretty darn close. But I think that assessment is what makes it so strong, not being afraid to change what seems like it's not working.
2 more things I'd like to get your take on. I know I said if we do this in 30, 40 minutes, we're doing it right. Well, we're doing it wrong but there's a lot to talk about. But the Marvel Roadshow, this was an arena show that you worked on?
Oh, yeah.
It was so many years ago. I worked with a team of investors. My company, Hardy Howell, actually did. And my partners, Tim and Todd, were the writers. I was the media producer. And it was a team that had, they had licensed the Marvel library to be able to do a live traveling show. And it wasn't with actors in costumes. It was more of a digital media show. So there was a 3D movie, there was a 4D like motion ride. There were.
What was the 3D movie called?
These were just short, like 5-minute experiences. So it was sort of like a traveling circus or like a traveling like amusement park where you could go and just everything was sort of like a ride or a game. So it was all really short clips. So
I feel I've seen a short 3D Marvel animated movie. Yeah. I wonder if I saw it.
Yeah.
Here and there, like in Vegas or something, like.
Right. It's that sort of thing that
in a truck, one of the at a fair, you go in and you watch
Yeah, but that was really fun. And that was actually pre-working on all this other Marvel stuff.
Right.
So it all comes back around full circle.
Yeah. And then lastly, we were talking about Chillicothe.
Chillicothe, yeah.
Chillicothe.
That is a town in Ohio, so that's why the difficult name. Yeah, that was my company's first film. Independent film, and it went to Sundance in '99, which was a cool year. That year was the year of Blair Witch, and it was the year of Run Lola Run, an American movie, like all these really great independent films. And we did get limited distribution there. It was a lot of fun to be in Park City for the first time, going to the festival, and
out of the gate. Good on you.
Yeah, right? That kind of changed. It really changed my life because it tweaked my brain. It tweaked my vision for myself. I was living in Indiana at the time, and I was meeting filmmakers, and they weren't famous and they weren't rich, but they were making films and generating and writing and just dreaming. And I really loved coming up against that whole film festival community and realizing like, this is attainable. You can step in and participate at any level. It doesn't have to be at the level of a Marvel or of a major franchise to be able to be a creative that can thrive in the business.
Yeah, and both Katie and her brother starred in it.
Yeah, a lot of our friends did. Yeah, my brother Todd was the writer, director, and star of it.
Mhm.
And a lot of our friends were actors in it, and I was as well.
Yeah, so there you go. So, I mean, a lot of people would say, hey, you want to be in my movie? It's going to go viral, going to Sundance. Are you? But you did. Good for you.
Yeah.
I think Sundance has changed a lot since then. I think the studios have uh, gotten their hooks in a little bit, where it's more of a launch pad for studio films. But I think some good ones still get through, but it feels like a little bit of a different machine at
Yeah,
this point than
you're
it did in
Still one
99.
it's one I will happy to see return after this lockdown. I want to see
Yeah.
the film festival is such a great just vibe. You know, I can't wait for it to return.
Yeah.
Well, Katie, thank you. And let's get to my final question to ask everybody who comes on the show. What is your favorite movie of all time?
Favorite movie? Isn't it so hard to choose one?
Well, there's cheaters all the time. I got 5, or I'll give you the one I like now, which is not, and none of those are the wrong answer. So
Yeah, no, I have so many, but there's one that like I easily say it's my favorite. It's Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Wow.
that's
I
the
love
number
it.
one of all time. It's the greatest movie ever made, right?
It is a perfect film. And, but I will say, and this is now I'm being like everybody else, I will say if you want to go with best sequence, I will stay within the trilogy, even though I don't feel like the movie is as good by any comparison, but the opening sequence to the second one, Temple of Doom, to me, when Kate Capshaw's singing Anything Goes, that sequence to me is like one of the best sequences in film.
I
love
saw
it.
that,
There's
and you can see now where Spielberg wants to make West Side Story. Already, he's got a musical in him, and now he's finally gonna see that through.
Yeah.
Man.
I was just going to say, being a movie guy, I have to say that I don't believe Raiders would have ever been made if it hadn't been for Lawrence of Arabia or Gunga Din, which you can see the influences that it is on Raiders. So, and I love both those movies.
Well, it's a great thing about 60s or 60s, 70s and 80s, early 80s, you know, mostly 70s, but into the 80s, action movies still have a classic tone to them. You know, Star Wars is my favorite Star Wars movie because it reeks of David Lean, while at the same time being action adventure. You know, now it's just all, how can we keep your attention? Please don't look away from the television, you know, because you're probably watching this at home, you know, which is a shame. But, you know, yeah, Raiders is a jam.
I had the thrill of over the years, from time to time, getting to know Howard Kazanjian, who was one of the producers on Raiders.
Oh, yeah.
And I hadn't really told him it was my favorite film yet, but we were sitting in his home office and I looked down under the glass of the coffee table and there was this little fold up clothes hanger. And I was like, is this the clothes hanger from Raiders? And he took it out and put it together and I was like, oh my gosh. And then I just had to like not be cool at all. And I was like, do you know, I think that is a perfect film. And he's like, I think so too. So it was nice that he could still be a fan even though he worked on it too.
Yeah, it has what, because that's a funny bit, right? Yet it doesn't derail the stakes. Like there's so much comedy in action movies nowadays, even in the later Indiana Jones movies, that just
it gets a little
we have to maintain the tension and the stakes, and everything is real, and it's going to be trouble, and then have fun within that. Whereas now it's just like, oh, we need comedy, and it's like, well, that's not the best reason to have it. You know, Raiders blended all that stuff together. The most iconic hero of all time, the greatest actor I grew up with, you know, and even the effects, I mean, hold up in a way. There's a couple green screens that are a little loopy, but mostly it's insanely good.
It's so good. If it's on, if I just happen to catch it on, even though I know like every second that's going to happen, or if it happens to be showing like in a theater, I got to see it, you know, it's projected 70 millimeter a few years ago. It's like, I'm going to go, I'm going to end up and I'm going to go and I'm going to enjoy like every heartbeat of the film that I already know, but I'm still going to love it.
I see it in the theater every year. That's why I live here. Even last year with the stupid lockdown, I saw it at a drive-in. So
wow.
Yeah, every year somewhere somebody shows it somewhere. So Well, you went out on a high note, Katie. That wraps another TMG interview. Follow us Twitter at The Movie Guys, Facebook.com/The Movie Guys, iTunes, Instagram, Apple Podcasts, all that nonsense for daily jokes, articles, media, links, and more. Thank you, Katie. What social of yours can we plug? Is there anything where people can follow your doings?
No. If they want to, I'm on Instagram. I'm just Katie Hooten on Instagram.
Katie,
What about Hardy Hal?
Hardy Hal, yeah, hardyhal.com. Thank you, Ray. What am I thinking?
You're welcome.
Yeah, then there's that. Then there's like the life goal.
that's my
No,
life's
Hardy-
work. Yeah. Where'd you get that name,
hardyhal.com.
Hardy Howell?
Oh man, how much time do you have? We used to operate under a different title, and over the years, we had different partners come and go from that company. But about 10 years ago, we decided to come up with a name that had a bit of a quirk and a bit of a character to it, but at the same time, that collective feeling when you go to the movies, which is, you know, a howl could be a laugh, it could be something startling or terrifying, but something that is collective that happens when you're in the theater. So that's been a bit of a mission for the stuff that we make, that it has some sort of transformational component to when you are exposed to the stories, you feel a part of them. So
That's cool.
Very cool.
And what was the .com on that? Or was it .com? Or is there no?
hardyhal.com.
There it is. And as ever, you can find what we're up to at themovieguys.net, including Ray's pick of the week every week for what he finds on the Blu-ray or 4K disc that he likes. And check it all out there. Thanks, Katie.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.